Hello everyone, welcome to the IEEE Communication Society podcast episode number 18. I'm Professor Aryan Kaushik. As you know, I'm the host of your podcast series for IEEE ComSoc. Today we are quite fortunate enough to have a special guest with us. So we have Professor Mohamed-Slim Alouini from KAUST in Saudi Arabia. He's a distinguished professor there and he's IEEE fellow as well. And he's a very well-known name in our field. As you may be aware, already he's working a lot in research of non-terrestrial networks, in research of electromagnetic signal information theory in terms of intelligent meta surfaces, and also with free space optics and many other topics. I mean, it'll be like a long list if I keep going, Slim. So with this, I welcome Professor Slim with us. Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Aryan. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity to discuss with you and with our ComSoc community about some of our research activity and research development in our field. And congratulations for this successful podcast series. I have seen some of them and I really enjoyed seeing colleagues talking about their research, recent development in our field. And I think it's really a good initiative to kind of democratize and give access to the young generation of researchers in our community about the recent development in wireless communication system and networks.
Yeah, thank you, Slim. I think from now we will escalate quite a lot after this video. So let's see, how much people enjoy our video. So I want to start with something very fundamental, something very basic we can. So we see that we talk about the 6G framework, the IMT 2030 framework, right? So there we have some enhanced capabilities compared to our previous 5G standard that we have had, right? Where we were discussing the triangular sort of framework. Now we have the hexagonal framework, where we add up some enhanced capability in terms of integrating sensing and communication, bringing on board like AI, sort of automated algorithms and so on in our communication equipment, and also ubiquitous connectivity is another aspect, right? Like anytime, anywhere, anything sort of connectivity. So as I know that you give like a lot of speeches, a lot of like keynotes around the topic of connecting the unconnecting, right? So basically the idea, what I understand from this term, is that you are trying to target some, let's say, remote areas or some disaster affected areas, or let's say where the connectivity has not reached yet, right? So what do you think about the sort of the term that we use, connecting the unconnected? And if you can share your initial thoughts and any other future developments that you're working around in this aspect, please, Slim.
Yeah, thank you, Aryan. Yes, indeed. This has been kind of a focus area for my research group over the last, I would say, roughly 10 years. It started like out of a kind of a visit to the African Academy of Science, where I was elected as an IEEE as a fellow, and I had to give a TED talk, like speech to the fellow of this academy, and I had to talk about something that was relevant to the continent. And I felt at that time, reading about digital divide, actually it's something that is a little bit overlooked in our community. Now, this was like in 2014, 15. At that time, really the theme of connected and unconnected, although it was an important problem, but I don't think it was researched enough in our research community. So it started at that time, step by step, and I realized actually not only it's an important problem, but actually it comes with an interesting set of problems that we can address as a researcher in the area of wireless communications. And why I think it's important, because until even now, even after COVID, we realized, worldwide that connectivity or the connectivity divide, if you will, is the modern face of inequality between the have and have not in this digital context. Even after that, after all this investment that has been done in trying to connect more the unconnected, we still live in a world that, according to the latest statistics, 1/3 is still unconnected, underconnected, about 3 billion people.
Wow.
And I'm glad to see that as part of, like you mentioned, 6G vision, or what we call IMD 2030, yes, we are trying to kind of push the envelope and go for these higher speed, lower latencies, enhance capability through integrate sensing and communication, how also take advantage of AI. All of this is great. This is kind of what I call the Olympic records of wireless communication. But along that, we are trying also to make an effort to connect more than connected through this ubiquitous or global connectivity, new user scenario that is being put as an important target that hopefully we achieve as part of the evolution of beyond 5G.
So how can we actually use it? Like, how can we actually achieve this? So is it like something with the like new sort of, let's say, non-terrestrial entities we can use, integrate them with the terrestrial network? Would you like to shed some light on that?
Definitely. First of all, I would just want to highlight that the problem is very complex. It's not only technical. There are some other ramifications that are more from social aspect,
societal
educational aspect, cultural aspect. Sometimes not enough content in the language that is spoken in these rural or hard to reach communities. But there is also a technical / economical aspect where basically we cannot rely like we do in urban environment, super dense from a dense population perspective type of setup on fiber optics. You cannot just keep digging fiber over hundreds, thousands of kilometers to reach these low population density, often low income areas. Essentially, there is no return on investment, and mobile network operator understandably cannot invest in these regions. So indeed, the way to go is to kind of gain an altitude, build this tower in the sky or in space, and with that we talk about non-terrestrial network. So it is the technical solution that can be adopted to bring more connectivity to essentially these hard to reach remote areas.
So the idea is that Slim is not to replace the terrestrial network, right?
Yes.
To complement this with the additional...
Exactly. It definitely is not about replacing. You need to have a coexistence. You need to have complementarity, actually, between different kind of networks. And I would like to make two remarks here. When we work in the area of connected and unconnected, like you mentioned in your introduction, you are actually touching on many other sectors. In particular, post-disaster emergency communication, where you lose connectivity overnight because of an earthquake, because of a volcano eruption, and you need to bring connectivity typically from the sky to be able to help with the first responders, basically action, but also with refugees or people who are affected and want to connect. But there are many other use scenarios. I would like in particular to highlight the fact that when we talk about connected and unconnected, yes, priority maybe is on connecting unconnected people, but also we are talking about connecting all kinds of devices. IoT actuators, sensors that can enable environment monitoring, that can enable smart agriculture. So once you have that umbrella, you can start collecting data and help with many of these other kind of verticals, if you want, or other kind of application. And then what I would like also to mention, offloading. When you design a network in an urban environment, there is variability, in traffic between day and night, residential area versus office area. Why should you densify extensively? Why not also bring connectivity on demand by offloading beams coming from the sky? And there are, for example, Professor Halim in Carleton has been a big advocate of this concept, and I agree with him. That's actually a very good use of non-terrestrial network. And finally, another important user scenario is that we are moving towards this so-called low altitude economy paradigm, where we are to be dealing not anymore with two-dimensional network, users essentially on the ground or in maybe some buildings. We are talking users that are active at different altitude in the form of drones that are used to deliver merchandise or used to move people with flying taxis and eVTOLs. So you have people operating at different altitude, when we are talking about from 0 to a few hundred meters, and connecting them from the ground with multiple handover may not be the most efficient way of doing that, given obstacles on the way and buildings. So in even urban environment, connecting from the sky can be the way to go. So that's my first remark. When you talk about connect and connected and invest in non-terrestrial network type of research and eventually deployment, you are indeed addressing rural connectivity, connecting the remote, hard-to-reach area, but you are touching few other important sectors that can benefit from this technology. That's remark number one. Remark number two, and that's in my opinion very important also observation from my side. We live in a world where density population is not binary. We don't have areas that are super highly dense and areas that are very lightly dense. This is a continuum.
Yes.
It's a continuum. And if you read about density population studies, it's well known that dense population decrease according to a power law. So from downtown, very high dense population, then you go into suburban area, rural, all the way to deep rural.
Right.
And dense population decrease accordingly. And what we are advocating for, those of us who are active in this area, for different dense population, you need different kind of aerial platform. So if you are in downtown, the best way to connect, probably actually to your gateway Wi-Fi if you are indoor, to your tower if you are in an urban environment, all the way maybe to the tether platform, to the high altitude platform station or HAPS, the stratosphere area, if you are not in that deep rural environment, all the way to satellite for maritime or deep rural. So there are a variety of aerial platform.
Yeah, because there are different layers as
different layers, different levels. They can help each other. They can collaborate. They can coexist. And yes, satellite.
For satellite as well. Yeah.
Satellite, of course, everyone know about satellite and the success story behind Starlink, which is great. We're all happy that this happened. And by the way, people tend to forget that, at least from my understanding, Starlink was about to be stopped as a project until the last trials, and then they were successful, and the rest is history. So all the other attempts to make this aerial platform successful, of course, some of them are struggling from an aerospace, from a kind of building infrastructure perspective. But once they are successful, once they are going to be built, I think they can be a very nice addition to this ecosystem of aerial platform that can help connect the unconnected in different type of setups.
Right. It's interesting, quite interesting. So, I mean, in also different categories, when you have like depending on the use case and application you have, or depending on the density of the area, do we have some sort of optimal solution for it? Do we consider, let's say, HAPS to be one of the most optimistic approaches compared to, let's say, lower altitudes? Or same thing goes with like LEOs, we are considering a better alternative compared to MEOs, GEOs, because you have like low latency and you are closer to the Earth's surface. So is there any sort of consideration like that where we consider one layer above the other as more beneficial?
So actually, we wrote a paper a couple of years ago, a paper that I tend to present in my talk, where the paper was not an optimization study. It was more a kind of an observation, or we tried to kind of we went with this advocacy statement saying that we need platform at different altitude to serve user operating in different type of density population environment. And we compared different alternatives. We say, okay, let's assume that we just put platform at a single altitude, platform at different altitude, but with a uniform density, with a uniform type of basically density of aerial platform. And then we used a variable height or variable altitude platforms. So we compared three scenarios, and we compare them from a coverage probability perspective. It turns out that the scenario that was adopting essentially a multi-tier or a multi-altitude type of platform is a scenario that gave the best coverage probability. So it was kind of confirming our kind of intuitive let's say kind of guess that actually that's the way you want to deploy. But there is a room maybe to formulate that problem as an optimization problem. It was like a more stochastic geometry type of performance analysis where we just compare different scenario. But maybe if you are given a certain density population, what will be the optimal location of platforms? Maybe there are people who have done that.
But that's a complex scenario to consider.
Yes, it can be complex, but still probably is an interesting study to do, to kind of exactly try to see, or maybe in real time, how can you adjust your height and adjust your coverage to cover all the areas with a limited number, say, of platform, but position at the right altitude with the right level of.
Then you have the trajectory optimization.
You can
path
also
planning,
include that into the in terms of like how long does it take to kind of move, etc. Because sometimes actually these platforms don't move very fast. They can be very light. They have to save energy. You know, the heavier you are, the more you consume. So usually power consumption is an important factor. Yes, this can be factored into your optimization problem, but definitely the message I'm trying to convey is not like again a binary type of solution. Towers in urban, satellite rural. You can, in my opinion, eventually will converge into kind of a setup where you would have few others type of aerial platform. Once from an aerospace perspective, they will be mature that can serve these different kind of user scenarios.
But Slim, also we have some issues, let's say, with the battery lives and so on. And it leads to me like one concept of free space optics too, because they are, trying to say about the sort of battery life issues they can solve with perhaps free space optics or something similar. Do you think like how can we deal with these power consumption issues, the battery life issues with, let's say, drones? Probably they will run maybe 48 hours or something. Then they are saying, let's use hot air balloons to provide this connectivity or something.
Yeah. So okay. So you're touching here on different important aspect, but there is some overlap, but there is also some kind of also different angle to the problem. So indeed, one of the main challenges of these aerial platform, drone, high altitude platform stations, and even satellite, although satellite may be a little bit less, I'll tell you why, but basically power consumption. Basically battery lifetime. This is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
How autonomous you can be in the sky. How often do you need to kind of do a replacement? So you have a fleet of drones.
But even for the satellites, I mean, it's already very loaded. Already consuming a lot of power in different things.
So just in a nutshell, if you want to summarize this constraint, and people who work in aerospace know this problem very well from a long time. There is a keyword that always aerospace engineers use. This keyword is, the acronym of it is SWAP. So SWAP stands for size, weight, and power. Every time you design a payload, so this payload can be for a drone, can be for a HAPS, can be for satellite, you need to worry about the SWAP parameters. How big is this platform or payload, how much does it weigh, and how much power does it need? This has a big implication on the mission. Can you carry this, and for how long? So often, indeed, what you have is a limited kind of battery lifetime for different altitude that will force you to have a fleet. So, I mean, one way to solve this problem is to, let's assume we are running drones and to connect a kind of a remote community. And if the battery lifetime is going to give you 1 hour of connectivity, you need to have a fleet of drones that every hour the drone that is ahead of you finish the mission, you send another drone that will pick it up and you do a handover. Exactly. And you keep doing that. So that's one solution. But of course, when you talk about HAPS, for example, the idea behind HAPS, they are basically stratospheric platform. For those who don't know, stratosphere is this layer at 20 kilometer altitude. It's a nice sweet spot, let's say, from a turbulence perspective, from a wind speed perspective, where once you are there, you can have some stability, you can have some endurance, you can stay for weeks, if not for months. Nonetheless, you need to have enough power to run a network, to run a base stations. And how can you generate power at 20 kilometer altitude? So there is a solar, basically, possibility, but it's limited. I mean, maybe it's good enough for IoT type of application, but if you need to run a true base station with beamforming capabilities, you need your few kilowatt. Solar will not be enough for the kind of size of HAPS we are talking about. So you need to look at the alternative. And one possibility is to use hydrogen fuel cell or hydrogen combustion engine, and there are some companies looking at that. But then there is, like you mentioned, this kind of maybe now science fiction type of concept, but maybe 20, 30 years down the road it will become our reality, which is how to use free space optic not only for communication, but also for power transfer. So this is known in the there is few people, I mean, like at least a few kind of companies and some funding allocated, particularly in the US, on this paradigm, is known as laser power beaming. And very recently, actually, there was some kind of interesting record that was established. I think they were able to send about 1 kilowatt over 5 kilometers.
Wow.
So, yes, eventually it will be nice to have a drone or even a HAPS, where basically from the ground, you are on a location where you can generate, let's say, cheaply, in a cheap fashion, energy, solar farm, or access to hydropower. And then you can laser beam power to this drone or to this HAPS, not only for propulsion purpose, so that basically this drone can keep flying, but also to power all the equipment, because at the end of the day, the point is not just to fly, is also to carry your base station, maybe your LiDAR, maybe your LoRa gateway, to do all the kind of application we are talking about.
And sometimes you need them for longer time as well.
Yes, but if you have that kind of sustainable source of energy from the ground to the space, done in an efficient and safe fashion, because you're transmitting at high power here, so there should be safety mechanisms.
That's what I was trying to ask as well with the free space optics. I mean, what can be the solution for power transfer?
So I mean, this is a niche area that is at the early stage. So we'll talk about free space optic, because free space optic has, I mean, in the standard way or the classical way, has many other benefits. But when you use free space optic as a laser power beaming, I mean, safety is an important aspect. So it has these kind of power station need to be located in super regulated areas in terms of who's close to that and who's going to cross that airspace. But my understanding from attending few of the talks on this topic, usually what they are talking about is a two-beam system. So there is an outer beam that is not very high intensity, just to detect if there is any crossing, a bird, helicopter, another drone that is not supposed to be there. That is going to shut down the inner high intensity beam if there is any crossing within that beam. But this is my high level understanding of what people are doing in that space. But it will be a nice capability that we'd have for this tower in the sky from a powering perspective, because this is definitely one of our current limitations. But now going to free space optics, because you asked about that, free space optic communication, and here this is our field, right? It's a field, and many of us in the community have been active, like our colleagues, Professor Harold Haas in Cambridge, Professor Murad Usal, for example, in NYU Abu Dhabi, Professor Halim again in Carlton. Many of our colleagues in communication theory, wireless communication, have been active in this area for many years. But we have to acknowledge that this technology, although it's getting more and more mature, it has been struggling to make it to the mass market for terrestrial application because of its sensitivity to weather condition, because MNO are so used to use RF, because collectively we have done so well in doing MIMO and increasing the capacity using RF, so they don't see a need actually to go to FSO. But now, as soon as you start talking about non-terrestrial network and going back to this keyword swap, then things become much more challenging. You cannot carry big antennas. Or, I mean, you can try to make it, and that's, for example, what ATS is doing. This is a very interesting project, kind of along the Starlink. They are trying for now, I think, their antenna, if I recall correctly, we are talking about an 8 meter by 8 meter antenna already. Be able to do this direct-to-device paradigm, the ability to connect directly your phone to a satellite, your regular phone, not a special satellite phone.
But this is not for just SOS services.
That's the point. The point is when we talk about connecting direct-to-device, of course, the starting point is SOS and texting. The ultimate objective is voice, or let's say the middle objective is voice, but the ultimate objective is broadband connectivity. And that's much more challenging. Given that you want to use the same phone, you are not going to attach your phone huge antenna.
Of course.
So you need to get the gain from the space. And how can you carry this 8 meter by 8 meter antenna? Of course, you can fold it and then open it in the space, and things can.
It's quite complex, actually.
It is complex. Or use a swarm of satellite, or to collaborate together to distribute beamforming. So that's why I'm saying that there are other paradigms we have to look at. HAPS being one of them. Drones can be another interesting solution to complement the capability that satellite can bring.
Perhaps you also need to use some edge cloud computing based solution in terms of the satellites, right?
Of course,
how you
if you have IoT, if you have capabilities of basically, if you're monitoring something and you don't want to always transfer information, yes,
So you put that on the cloud.
Yeah, you can do a lot of things at the edge or the cloud, and then transmit only when needed.
Because,
Sorry, Iran, just to go back to one point I want to kind of complete in terms of free space optics. At the end of the day, all these platforms, satellite, HAPS, drones, are relays.
Right.
You can just store information buffer, but at the end of the day, you need to send back the information and take it back to the internet. That feeder link, that backhaul, FSO can be a great solution because of this swap constraint, because it's more energy efficient, because you are operating at the optical band. Things are going to be lighter, smaller size, and you can kind of basically operate in the part of the spectrum that is interference free, is uncongested. Because if you are trying to use the same band that satellite are using now, these bands are already, Ka band, for instance, is quite congested. So that's why FSO, for sure, from a communication perspective, is the way to go for inter-platform communication. And as you know, and probably our audience know, Starlink is already using that. Like the satellite that are interconnected in space are using free space optics to talk to each other because they are above the atmosphere. So just a question of.
But they're mostly in the low Earth orbit. They're not.
Yeah. I mean, but as long as you're above the stratosphere, you are above atmospheric turbulence, so you can basically kind of point and transmit at high speed. The challenge is how to go from the ground to space and cross the first 10-15 kilometers of turbulence, and how to mitigate that through different techniques such as adaptive optics and so on. So basically, but that's, I would say, an interesting research that is being done. I mean, there are some interesting results and there's potential and interesting demonstration. Actually, it's not only theoretical studies. There are some demos and some interesting proof of concept showing the potential of free space optic in this context of non-terrestrial network.
Yes, I have a good question coming up for this one, but before that, I would like to touch on like free space optics. I mean, I want to continue on that first. So basically, can we also link this to some sort of sensing capabilities, something of like sensing comms in that context? Can we use visible light communication for, let's say, combined with ISAC and provide different new use cases, applications? I remember we had done a panel together in Valencia last year in PMRC. So we, you had discussed about this idea. I'm really intrigued by that, actually.
Yeah, it's actually, this is, an interesting question, because indeed we all know how ISAC, yourself, you have been active in ISAC, and maybe you can tell us more about the recent development in ISAC in the RF world. But ISAC is not restricted to RF frequencies. You can do ISAC in the optical band. So, for instance, an example that I'm familiar with, although we have not done active research in it ourselves, but I have seen colleagues work on that. One of the problems that is important to the oil and gas industry is detection of methane leakages, because this can be a source of accidents. One way to detect methane leakage is by using laser spectroscopy. That's a sensing approach. So think about it. You have a platform in the sky in the form of a drone or even a LEO satellite or a HAPS, and you have an optical link as a feeder link. If you use that same wavelength, or maybe you can have dual wavelength, like a wavelength for communication, another wavelength for basically sensing, so you have a dual wavelength, but it's the same system with the same pointing mechanism, you can piggyback on that link to communicate information and to sense and to see if the signature that of the medium that you are going through is actually signaling that there is some leakages. And that's what they are doing now, but for terrestrial application. But one can do it also from ground to space and detect over larger area. Because again, once you have this platform, you have large visibility, large line of sight, you can target multiple locations simultaneously and detect if there are some leakages.
But Slim, there is one problem here with the security and privacy. Because again, I mean, you have the larger coverage, but you can't really be sensing every single node around you, because you see some information might be sensitive. So do you think we may need to filter out, because especially in the case of non-terrestrial, because there is a larger coverage, right? So you're covering different areas and stuff, and something might be sensitive in the other area that you're covering, might not be sensitive here.
This is always
something like that, right?
Yeah. So I always say in this kind of situation, as scientists, as researchers, we have always to look at the good thing, at the good side of things. But of course, we should not be naive.
But this is a societal concern.
Of course,
as well.
what I'm trying to say, all of these technologies can be used in sometimes negative way or even misused. Is sometimes I would say yes. I mean, we cannot solve all the problems. We are here to try to address some, let's say, connect the unconnected problems. How to increase, for example, sensing capabilities, with the understanding that we hope that there will be some regulation that will be adopted to make sure that these technology are used in a fair way, in a way that preserve our privacy, preserve equity, preserve like the fact that people can have access.
But the other thing is, like, let's say, like in a scenario where you actually need to filter out some information. Let's say your application is, let's say, to sense. I mean, especially let's say in indoor scenarios, you might be, putting, let's say, a camera as a sensor, and then you say, let's say, I would just like to sense my activity of the cat, let's say, right? And I do not want to sense any human in the vicinity. So you need to filter that out. So
I mean,
it may not be sensitive information per se, but your application is based on that.
So in other words, you offer the capability. Recently, actually, I was in a conference, and there was this interesting kind of paper showing a camera attached to a high-altitude platform station that gives you centimeter level resolution from the stratosphere.
Very important.
You can basically imagine the capability that you can do, or the potential that in terms of border security, but also privacy issues. So one way, in a way, this is what you're alluding to. You may have an alarm kind of system, where basically you are not supposed to transfer all this information. There is this camera on board, there is processing happenings, and you send information only if you feel that there is something to report. Otherwise, you can delete the information because you probably don't need it. But the capability is there. I mean, the technology will allow us to kind of get this level of resolution.
There has to be coherence to this, then. I mean, through the service providers, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean that's like the edge kind of aspect, like how much you can do in the edge, how much you can process, how much you can filter, how much what do you need, what you are allowed actually to kind of store. This can be part of the regulation that can be imposed on the operator of these kind of platforms. But definitely, the capability, once the capability is there, you need to have regulation to kind of preserve privacy and security.
But do you think we are able to see this in 6G infrastructure when it actually comes around? Or this is something like beyond?
I think this is beyond, honestly. I mean, like this full ecosystem, different layer, different platform. I think that clearly what we are seeing now is satellite becoming part of our ecosystems. Those of us who went to the last Mobile World Congress, we have seen that this non-terrestrial network is really becoming full part of GSMA and 5G and eventually 6G, this direct-to-device connectivity. The ability to have your standard phone connect to a satellite is becoming a paradigm that is not anymore kind of a luxury or a kind of a visionary thought. It's something that all operator want to implement. Maybe, as you mentioned, for SOS as a starting point, texting, voice, eventually broadband. This is what I think we'll see in the next few years.
But broadband might take some time.
It may take some time, or maybe it will be very expensive, or it will maybe limited to a certain capacity, or certain arrangement, like basically with offloading, like not direct to device, maybe through a relay kind of situation in an airplane, like what we are, like a lot of airplanes are switching to Starlink, for example, to provide Wi-Fi connectivity to passenger on board. But direct device, yes, broadband will still be limited. And I think there is research on how to increase the size of antennas, and there is this interesting research that's being done by a few people on distributed beamforming, how to use basically a swarm, let's say, for multiple satellites.
Yeah, also called mega constellation.
And capitalize on this mega constellation in a distributed fashion to do distributed beamforming. Very challenging problem, because already on the ground we are having a synchronization challenge when we talk about distributed MIMO. Think about it when you have all these constellation at full speed with the Doppler effect.
Doppler shift effect.
Exactly. So it is not, I'm not saying it's an easy problem, but like any research problem, you have to start. And that's, but what I would like to emphasize, this is, I think, what we'll see in the next few years. It's like more solidification, if you will, or this kind of convergence between satellite and cellular, which is a great thing. Because I remember when I was a PhD student, even at that time, satellite was actually booming. Maybe the young audience don't remember that.
90s and all.
Yeah, the late 90s, early 2000s, people were talking about Teledesic, Iridium, all these constellations.
I know.
It worked very well because we went to these two silos. There was a cellular silo, which was very successful on its own, and there is a satellite silo, which was not as successful.
But it came back with the...
But now, why it came back?
No, yeah.
And why is it different now and then? Now, because you have this kind of internet browsing capabilities with these dishes that you can put in remote areas, but also this vision of having direct to device, where we don't change our device based on our location, because that's what happened before. You are urban environment, you use your standard phone, you are on a boat, you take one of these big phone of Iridium or other kind of service providers. But now these two phones are going to converge. They are going to use the same standard, and in a complete transparent way to the user, they will allow it to connect to the terrestrial base station attached to the tower very close to in your neighborhood, or if you are in the sea, to a satellite. This is, I think, we'll see it in the coming few years as part of 6G. But this kind of other paradigm, multiple layers, coordination of different layers, full free space optics, I think it will take probably an extra generation, maybe 15, 20 years to be fully operational. I mean,
yeah, no, I'm optimistic about it. I mean, I've been asked also many times in when I give speeches and all. I'm optimistic about the technology, how it is growing. Like when you read reports and all, you see the revenue is also increasing, and the technology, like a lot of stakeholders are taking part now, trying to make all these objectives that we talk about as reality, right? So I'm optimistic, but I'm just saying, like, I'm also being pragmatic at the same time, is that whether it's actually going to be into our 6G infrastructure or not, because this is one of the key objectives we have taken through, right? The ubiquitous connectivity, your ubiquitous intelligence, right? Combining with your AI models, or maybe trying to come up with dynamic transmission and so on, right? So in terms of the payload as well, so if you put in more and more AI algorithms, try to increase the accuracy of these algorithms and try to train the models in a very effective way. This is already very high processing aspect, right? So this can also increase your payload even further. Satellites are heavy already, like with the swap thing that you mentioned. Yeah. It's already tricky, and then you put on more solutions, make it trickier.
I agree with that. And actually, it's even more complicated when you think about it. Because at the end of the day, and sometimes there is this confusion, at least in our community, and I was the first one maybe to be part of this confusion initially. Yeah. We tend to think about this project from a purely communication perspective, but the reality that these are not communication projects. I think we need to decouple the platform from the application. So to me, a satellite or a drone or a high altitude platform station is a tower in the sky or a tower in the space. Connectivity is one application among many. Of course, it's a great application for connect the unconnected or the various things I talked about earlier, but actually it has many more applications in environment monitoring, camera, like you said, border control, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, basically weather monitoring for putting radar,
air traffic control,
yes,
security, some other aspects.
It is a tower again in the sky with a payload that is
like a
very
station,
customized, depending on, and in a way, in many countries. What you see is this is happening for terrestrial market. Yeah. In many countries, the mobile network operators don't operate anymore all the towers. Some of the towers, it's a business on its own. There are companies, their only job is to build tower, clean them, maintain them, power them, strategically find their pick their location, and then the mobile control operator come and put its base station or you put like a camera. And same thing, this will be an infrastructure in the sky or in space that is there, and you rent part of the payload for connectivity application, whereas someone else may put a radar for something.
But this is all integrated, right? That's what
eventually it has to all work together. But what I'm trying to say, this is not,
might be different domains.
In our case, I think at this stage, what we are trying to look at is assume that you have that platform, with the right amount of power, with the right stability, with the right endurance, what can you do with it? What can you enable? How much of capacity you can bring to the ground? And that's, of course, problems that we can solve.
We need to consider the constraint, though, especially
Of course,
in terms
we have to be realistic, and we have actually also to drive. We have to ask from our colleague, this is the amount of power I need to run a meaningful, let's say, beamforming strategy with AI-enabled type of algorithm. I will need 20 kilowatt. Can you provide me 20 kilowatt at 20 kilowatt?
And you assume that they are providing.
Yes, so that it's like an iterative process. We need to know what is reasonable, but you need also to say, this is what we need. If you are giving me much less than that, I will not be able to run my algorithm the way I want to run them. I will not be able to do the kind of beamforming that will allow you to bring high capacity data rates on the ground. So it's an iterative process between those of us more on the application and those in charge of building this infrastructure in air or in space.
It also leads me to another aspect. So this is one problem that we just consider the challenge that we have, is also about the spectrum harmonization. Because when we are talking about the integration of non-terrestrial entities with terrestrial network, right? So we are saying that we have the cellular network working very well. So when we are moving forward from SOS services, right, to provide broadband services at some point, right? So we need to harmonize the spectrum with the cellular network spectrum usage that we have. So what kind of solutions you think we can utilize when we make this integration happen, right? So getting the direct access from your satellite to your smartphone. So this would require some sort of channeling, right? Some sort of coordination as well with the cellular network itself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we hear all these terms, spectrum reuse, sharing of spectrum, and, some other aspects as well. We also did some podcasts where there was a guy from Spectrum, and he mentioned a lot more usage scenarios and, sort of advantages of spectrum sharing and so on. So in your thought, what do you think, where we are heading with this, the spectrum harmonization of the cellular network and the integration we are trying to do with the non-terrestrial entities?
Yeah, definitely it's an important problem. Because in one hand, we want to have this problem. Because the easy thing to do is to say, you know what, if you are operating foreground type of network, use this spectrum. If you are operating for space, use this spectrum. Why this is not a good idea? Because first of all, it's not efficient. And second of all, you may not end up having all of these bands in your phone. You want the same band to be fully utilized for ground and for space, to have this harmonization and this basically kind of unification of the two sectors. And just as a parenthesis here, one of the big win for the HAPS industry, this high altitude platforms station industry, in the last ITU World Radio Conference in December 2023, that a lot of the IMT spectrum that is used for terrestrial network has been kind of, from a regulation perspective, has been kind of allowed to be used for HAPS as an access solution. Because again, HAPS is a relay, so it has an access part and it has a feeder link part. So which means it's up to the mobile network operator that hopefully is going to have base station on the ground and maybe some base station in these platforms to coordinate, to make sure that basically interference is managed. So recently we wrote a paper on exact this problem, and we show that indeed, if you don't coordinate, meaning by that you just, for example, assign by location. If I am in an urban environment, I connect to the terrestrial base station. If I am on a rural area, I connect to let's say, to a HAPS. Then the user who are at the fringe will suffer a lot from interference, because if they connect to a HAPS, they will have a lot of interference coming from terrestrial base station operating on the same spectrum. There should be some coordination, some association based on the quality of the channel, where basically you have to pick what is your best channel and maybe do some beamforming, nulling, to be able to make sure that even so, while you help the deep rural users, you don't affect the users who are at the boundary between rural and urban environment.
Makes sense.
So coordinations is a key. And I think, and that's, I would say, point number one. Point number two, and this is actually, in my view, an important aspect that we need to highlight. many of us, and I'm sure, have you done some work on spectrum sharing, cognitive radio?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, so I have worked more on the AI side of like using, let's say, AI for resource
Spectrum sharing.
allocation, and also like spectrum solutions as well. And
So I think many of us over the years, like the concept of cognitive radio that was initiated by Mitola in the 2000s and so on, has been an interesting academic exercise. Generation of students and postdoc and faculty over the last 20-25 years have been active on this concept of spectrum sharing.
For me as well, ISAC was, I mean, when ISAC started, so it's actually one of the reasons was the decongestion of the spectrum, because now two operations you can use on the same
so
same
exactly.
frequency.
So
that was the idea, actually.
So, but this concept of cognitive radio at that time was called spectrum sharing. It gained a lot of momentum in academic circles. Tons of paper have been written. But to be honest, very few or not much of it has been translated to a practical deployment. Now, recently in the US, CBRS has been a success story, and I hope this can be generalized to more countries and to more applications. But what I would like to highlight is we are at a time we have to recognize that really the spectrum is getting congested. And if you want to keep taking advantage of what we call this front beach spectrum, we need to start activating spectrum sharing strategy. That are, of course, we have to be pragmatic, that have to be practical. And there are ways of doing it. And AI can be a big help because AI can allow us to predict, to manage, to kind of run this kind of shared system in an efficient way. But I think we know that one of the 5G success story is this mid-band, right? And it's kind of expected that for beyond 5G and 6G, what people call the upper mid-band, is going to be the next very useful.
So what
band.
kind of frequency values you're talking?
I think this what they call FR3 is like bands like a little bit above the mid band, but before millimeter wave. So like this band.
So about, let's say, 8, 10, 12 gigahertz frequencies people are considering. But there is one point here is that they're already using it for
exactly.
different
So we have to be ready for that transition. And to be ready, you need to start early. You should not wait 2030 to start vacating this band or developing spectrum sharing strategy. I think now we have few years ahead of us to avoid some of the delay that we have seen in some countries in the adoption of 5G because of the fact that they didn't predict that the mid band is going to be as successful.
Understood.
It created a lot of delays in many countries because they were not ready for it. I think now we should send this kind of message to the operator, to the regulator, that if you want to be ready for 6G, clearly the upper mid band is going to be very promising and be ready for it. What does mean be ready? If you have a spectrum sharing problem to solve it now. If you have radar operating in that band, make sure that you put them somewhere else, or you have a strategy,
or maybe use ISAC sort of functions, combine things together.
If you have all kind of satellite communication are using extensively that band. How can you share satellite, for example, by putting some buffer zone? Like there are techniques to like around ground stations where basically you will allow let's say mobile frequencies to operate in certain bands outside the ground station location. There are ways of mitigating sharing spectrum spatially, temporarily, using ISAC or dual use type of dual function type of capabilities. I think there are a few years ahead of us, and I hope that we will not face the same kind of delays that some countries face in the 5G adoption.
5G era.
If the upper mid band is going indeed to be part of 6G.
But Slim, what I understand is like we have been a little bit, how do you say, not so adaptable to changes very quick, right? So that was also the idea that we want to stick closer to these sub 6 gigahertz frequencies, right? We don't want to go too high to millimeter wave and to sub terahertz or terahertz bands. I mean, sub terahertz, we are saying that we can use it as a complementary spectrum.
Of course, some there are some scenarios that are very nice for that. Some
geographical locations where we require high capacity
stadiums and area where there is high density population. That's the way to go. But it's clear that the 5G message that mobile network operator liked very much the mid-band, and it's clear.
Centimeter wave sort of
yes,
frequencies.
the upper mid-band centimeter wave is going to be a big band that we have to deal with for beyond 5G and 6G.
And it's also closer to microwave spectrum. So, I mean, the current infrastructure that we have, we don't need to do too many changes.
Yeah,
in
it's
that,
kind
right?
of people actually like this gradual evolution.
Because millimeter wave was a little bit jump. I mean,
but it's still there. I mean,
it's still there. Yeah,
there. It's good
in
It's
FWA.
going to be very nice for certain high density hotspot type of applications, but you still need to keep using. And this is actually natural evolution, you know. If you have a spectrum that is not very used efficiently, because much of the spectrum is underused. I mean, this is a fact. It's like, I mean, legacy spectrum. People have it because, you know, they have it for forever. For something can be done more efficiently in a more spectrally efficient way. Things can be shared in a time. Like, again, I give always the example of CBRS in the US. You know, it's a nice success story. A full business kind of evolved around the CBRS band with private networks, with companies that are using the spectrum to distribute internet in suburban area at a lower cost. So I think that kind of paradigm hopefully can be generalized to many other countries.
Yeah, exactly. And in some countries, we don't even have 5G yet, right?
Yeah.
So the transition might be a little bit easier in this case if we stick to maybe centimeter wave bands. And
yeah, they will actually from 4G to 6G.
If we jump directly on terahertz or something, it might be a sudden change.
Then maybe not the. I mean, this again, millimeter wave, eventually terahertz, or again, a lot of nice research, and that maybe are good for super high dense environment, or like as a cable replacement solution. These are also very nice application. Data centers. You know, you want to get rid of all these cabling problems. You know, point-to-point type of connectivity. Terahertz can be great for that, or actually free space optic also. So there are applications for all of this technology that has been developed. You know, but you know, different use scenario will require different kind of.
So what we are saying, let's say on the phones, so we are trying to implement these massive MIMO solutions because we want to reach higher capacity, right? So perhaps even at the sort of low to mid-band spectrum or upper mid-band spectrum that you were talking about. So we can actually achieve terabits per second sort of capable speeds by using next generation MIMO technology.
The idea is to push further this kind of
new beam.
Yes, the beam, you know, like more antennas, more, you know, to kind of optimize the use of the spectrum, hopefully to be able to drive the capacity further and have a nice trade-off, you know, because that's the beauty of this part of the spectrum. We still have good coverage, relatively speaking, good penetration, loss. You want to take advantage of that. You want to take advantage of the fact that in contrast to what happens in the higher frequency millimeter wave terahertz, as soon as you start having any kind of obstruction, including human being, the link gets kind of blocked. And
of course, there's like a wave going. If I shake my hand, the link they're gone.
This is still in the area where you know, we have a good experience how to deal with obstacles. With we are still in the area where basic mobile network operators have a lot of experience in deploying networks successfully in an affordable fashion and an efficient fashion.
Exactly. I think this was amazing to discuss this. So, I mean, I think finally, I mean, before we conclude our podcast, is like, where are we actually heading after this? I mean, after all this discussion we have had, what do you think are the future prospects of all these technologies, of the, you know, hexagonal framework that we talked about? We are including this in standards as well now. You know, we have the ISAC included in 3GPP release 19, NTN continued from release 17, 18 going through release 19 now, right? And we have AI for more open RAN or RAN applications. We are considering high mobility scenarios. Energy efficiency, sustainability is one of the key aspects that's leading to a lot more solutions that we were looking forward to, because 5G, we didn't really have energy efficiency as the key, you know, key aspect, because we were focusing a lot on the capacity, massive connectivity. We lost somewhere on the way. Energy efficiency is bringing back now in 6G. So where are we actually heading after all this? What do you think can be the final ultimate sort of catalysts into realizing what we want to achieve? And what other technologies, let's say quantum or something similar, do you think might appear in the immediate future or in the really far future? What do you think? Where are we heading with all this?
I mean, I think clearly, actually, I like how IMT 2030 is summarizing the landscape. Like, we are building on what you have done in 5G. These three
You're
very
depending on
famous
that.
user scenario, EMBB pushed a little bit further, ultra reliable low latency maybe push even further.
Hyper reliable and new term.
Yes,
thinking,
hyper
yeah.
reliability, and then massive machine type connectivity again for even more
Massively
dense
connected
networking
solution.
case.
Yeah.
So this is pushing the envelope. Plus with these three user scenario, which is basically this ubiquitous connectivity. We talk quite a bit about that. This ISAC, this multifunction, how to piggyback on a communication link to kind of do sensing, imaging, localization, maybe even power transfer is not ISAC, but this piggybacking type of concept, multifunction aspect that you can embed in your link capabilities.
And many applications like smart healthcare, augmented human sense.
Of course, yeah. So they call on benefit. And again, I put the wire power transfer at the micro power level swept all the way to the high power transfer I was talking about to power drones. So this is all dual function capabilities that communication plus X can be
even for, let's say, free space optics. You might need to sense where the drone, where the swarm of UAVs. You need the high accuracy sensing
localization, like lidar, like basically combining lidar capability with a laser FSO capability. So that's kind of exactly what you are talking about, like localizing things with a laser.
But with centimeter level accuracy.
Very high, and actually even imaging. You can even image the whatever you want.
Imaging, mapping, localization
so
together.
This all is a very important kind of emerging scenario. But I think what is clearly, and we all see that in our daily life, this has been identified in IMT 2030, is AI for communication and communication for AI. How these two fields are going to interact together over the next years and basically bring revolution to our
over-the-air computing is
exactly nice. So that's why it's like AI for communication, communication for AI. And you talked about energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is important for sustainability objective, but also is very important for cost reduction. You want to reduce your energy bill, and AI can be very helpful. People are talking more and more, and today in the conference we have seen many paper, or maybe I was in one session talking about AI run, how basically radio access network can benefit, and you are doing quite a bit of interesting research in this space, and you gave a nice talk on this. So this how AI can help optimize the resources and reduce the cost of mobile network operator, can make them more energy efficient and run more efficiently. So I think this is clearly a direction that when you talk to mobile network operator, for them this is very critical. Because we have to admit, and the statistics is available for everyone to check, we are still seeing a growth in terms of mobile users, but the rate of the growth is slowing down. This is not the way this is not as it is a few years ago. There is a little bit of a saturation. So which means, we are more scientists, more research, but we have to listen to colleagues in the business part of the wireless communication. For them, they need to cut costs. They have to be more efficient. And I think clearly AI can be a big enabler to optimize network, to run network more efficiently, in a more sustainable fashion, and at all levels. In terms of how to run the network, how to maintain the network, how to prediction, on the level of maintenance that is needed. So definitely in the future, I see much more integration between AI and between communication. And this leads me to, I think your podcast, I assume, is followed by like the younger generation, and I hope also with maybe also the old.
No, we have all sorts of people.
But I'm trying I would like to talk to students who are doing their master or PhD. At the time I did my graduate studies, I'm younger than you, but I remember, if you do communication, obviously you need to take your class on probability and random process, your class on optimization theory, maybe game theory, as a mathematical background to be able to kind of understand and do some, let's say, good research in communication system. I think nowadays you really need to take AI courses. You need to take machine learning. It's a tool. You don't have to do research in this field, but you have to understand the capability that machine learning provide to solve communication problem. How do you formulate a problem to be able to solve with the current up-to-date AI tools? And I think that's clearly now part of the skill or tool that the communication engineer has.
You're using it everywhere now.
Of course, but I'm saying
communication is quite vital.
It is clearly is as important as the mathematical tool that we used to have as part of graduate studies. And my students, I strongly advise them now to make sure that they don't have, again, to do research on this field, but to be aware of the development in machine learning and AI, to be able to do comparative research.
And also new techniques are coming. So we were, like, when we were doing research a couple of years ago, we were always using deep reinforcement learning.
Of course, there's
now coming to federated learning.
Yes.
Transfer learning, something like new split federated learning.
So actually, and maybe it's a good opportunity now to tell us about like federated learning in the context of satellites or in the context of mobile communication. How do you see federated learning being used?
I think this is going to be quite useful in the coming years, because the thing was, so in our group, so what we have been focusing on is mainly resource management, resource allocation, and intelligently doing that. So let's say we have some sort of tier network architecture, right? So you have multiple satellites communicating with each other on the edge plane, then some computationally inefficient information you store on the cloud, and then you have the also integration with the ground user, your marine areas, remote areas, whatever, rural areas, or any other network that you want to communicate with. And at the same time, how you enable this is you use some sort of actor critic network model to basically reach faster to the optimal solution. So we were aiming for, let's say, more energy efficient aspects, or minimize the energy consumption used in maintaining this edge cloud computing and trying to pick all the resources and so on, computing or communication resources, right? And we have a lot of constraints. It's a very, very big problem. It's a very complex problem in general, because we also want to also minimize the latency as well at the same time. Yes. So, age of information or whatever, UAV scenarios you call it, right? So for satellites, we are, trying to reduce the latency, minimize the energy consumption. Very complex problem, but you use a good AI algorithm to basically, allocate these resources intelligently. So we were using deep reinforcement learning a lot in the last few years. We published a lot of papers on that. But now we are moving towards more variants of the machine learning, right? So basically, we are trying to come up with federated learning, combining this with ISAC, combining this with, non-terrestrial networks, use it in different scenarios, right? And I do see that this might be a very useful tool. So I'm not going into details of federated learning per se, but I'm trying to say that this might have a good future in terms of the applications that we can reach with it, right? So now people are combining semantic communication with federated learning, right? So in that architecture that you have of the semantic comps, actually federated learning can enhance the the accuracy, the sort of estimation accuracy that you're aiming for. Now we also, in one paper that we published in JSAC recently, we combined actually all these machine learning methods. DRL actually we use in that paper, but we combined with quantum. So quantum actually increased the accuracy even further. So I'm actually always looking for something new variant of the machine learning methods, and I see federated learning or let's say any other approaches from machine learning background will be very useful to increase the accuracies further and further, combined with quantum theory as well, combined with, it has to be some amalgamation of many different techniques coming all together. Looks complex on the picture, but it is quite feasible in a way, because it requires coordination and stuff like that, as you were also saying earlier. So I do see a great future of all these variants of machine learning, if you ask me, but we need to keep exploring. We are still at the sort of early stages to see. But with 6G, the best thing that I see, Slim, is that it's very use case and application oriented. So as we were discussing, for robotics, for, agriculture applications, public safety, search and rescue applications, or any sort of environmental monitoring or something, we bring on sensing on board. Then we, make this AI usage to increase the sort of performance of the algorithm that we are using. And then we also, plug this all with non-terrestrial networks, reach the larger distances as large as possible.
Increase your coverage, yeah.
Exactly, increase the coverage and all. So I think this is very fascinating in a way. We are already living in future, if you ask me. So in a way, what we were thinking for 5G, we were not so ambitious in a way that we, increase the sort of capabilities even more. So I do see that it is going to be an amazing era, hopefully. And we will see many, applications and everything is combined together. Healthcare is now combined with, with communication, networking, ISAC, and everything all together. So yeah, I mean, this is my like 2 cents on the thing. But with this, I think thank you so much, Slim. I think we learned a lot, and I learned a lot from this talk that we have had, and I hope that the students and the people watching would have learned a lot as well from this talk that we have just had, this chat. Thank you so much for coming, Slim, and hopefully we do perhaps another podcast maybe later next year, and we see where we are heading and what are the updates from what we discussed, where we left off with this. And so we will conclude, and we'll see you later in the next year or so. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Aryan, for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity.